Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. We are streaming on am950radio.com and on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe, share the show, click that bell so that when we come live, you can join us at all times. But share the show, share the show, share the show, share the show. We're also streaming on X on Santita Jackson Show. And meet me on Santita J. Just go there. Just go to Santita J. That's my handle there. And of course, Santita Jackson and friends on Facebook. That's the only place you can get me, everybody. We've got a couple of really, really interesting topics to tackle today. In the second hour, we will be talking about Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. It is the 56th anniversary of his assassination. Can you imagine? He was killed a year to the day, to the minute, that he announced his opposition to the Vietnam War. April 4th, 1967, he announced his opposition to the Vietnam War in his iconic speech at the Riverside Church, April 4th, 1967, just after 6 p.m. And then just after 6 p.m. at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee, when he was speaking to, of all people, my father and to Ben Branch, a noted musician. He was shot. Shots rang out just after 6, and no one has been the same. And yet, he is more relevant today than he has ever been. Than ever. Got to talk about that in the second hour. Then I have his godson. You know him, John Nichols, Congressman Jonathan Luther Jackson.
Very well, yes.
Other people, and Reverend Graydon Agler, who was one of his colleagues. It's going to be a great conversation. But right now, let's talk about this election, 2024. You know, it looked like it was not going to be really exciting. Like, ho hum, we already have a nominee on the Republican side. Ho hum, we've got a Democratic nominee. Not so, everybody. It is getting more exciting by the contest. And boy, what happened yesterday? Well, this is the headline. Rachel Ida Buff, Jewish Voice for Peace, and Joshua Feinstein, Jewish Voice for Peace Action, Michigan. You are up in Wisconsin, Professor Buff, and then you are in Michigan. But it's become a movement. It's national, so I really can't confine you all to Wisconsin and to Michigan. And John Nichols, of course, from the Nation magazine, is going to give us the 40,000-foot view and take us down into the weeds. This is from Politico. Biden and Trump cruised in Tuesday's primaries, but get this, everybody. They said, but both showed signs of weakness as we looked at New York, Wisconsin, Connecticut, Rhode Island. What happened? They go on to say in this article, the holdouts in each party continued to flex their muscles on Tuesday in these primaries. And though there were more Republican holdouts, voters who cast ballots for candidates other than Trump, the Democratic ones in those contests, it seems that Biden's problem is more acute. So we need to talk about that. This uncommitted, uninstructed campaign, it's a movement and it's growing. And I want to know what you think about it. What happened up there with you in Wisconsin? John, of course, I want to get Rachel's view of this as well. But what did we see? I mean, not just Wisconsin, but in these other states, it just seems that when people hear about the campaign, John Nichols, they get involved in it. It's a movement for them. Talk to me.
Well, yesterday was a very important day for the uncommitted, uninstructed movement across the country. And let's remember, for folks who might just be tuning in for the first time or early on in this, that this really got started in Michigan. And Michigan progressives, people especially in the Muslim American community, Palestinian community there, Palestinian Christians and Muslims, as well as activists with Jewish Voice for Peace and other groups, decided to take a chance on the Michigan primary and to see if they could get a significant vote for uncommitted in that state. They got a good, solid vote there, and it definitely had an impact on the White House. There's no question that the Biden administration's rhetoric shifted after the Michigan result. What's striking is that it took off in other places. It was such a good idea. In Minnesota, they got up to 18, 19% of the vote and actually won a significant number of delegates. In Hawaii, they got to close to 30% of the vote and won a significant number of delegates. And this has just kept rolling along. We now, as of yesterday, passed 500,000 votes nationwide for uncommitted or uninstructed for one of these no preference options. And what we saw yesterday was significant in a number of states. I'll start out further afield from my own state of Wisconsin. In Rhode Island, it was a very significant vote. Rhode Island, about 15% of Democratic primary voters voted uncommitted. There is a chance, a decent chance, that in the district centered on in the heart of the city of Providence, that the uncommitted movement will get 2 more delegates out of Rhode Island. That'll put them up, moving into the zone of around 25 delegates to the convention. Not a lot, but enough to actually raise some issues, especially when you remember that some of the people who will be at that convention as Biden delegates or as elected officials are also committed to a Gaza ceasefire. And so you've got the potential to actually start building some things out. In Connecticut, you had about 12% support for uncommitted. That was a very significant vote. And they had a decent campaign there, but not overwhelming. They did it very fast and got very, very strong votes out of the New Haven area, Hartford area, did real well. And so then we come back into, well, let me stop one of the places I moved there, and that's to look at New York State. New York didn't have an uncommitted option on the ballot, and so they had a campaign to leave your ballot blank. It appears that while we've still got a lot of tabulation to go, that you could have in the range of 10 to 12% blank, maybe even a little more. That won't necessarily all be folks who are sending a message about Gaza, but it's certainly spiked up. So that, again, another significant result. And finally, we come over to Wisconsin, which is my home state. In Wisconsin, the campaign started, relatively late, and it did not have a lot of money or anything like that. And yet, notably, we got close to 50,000 votes. And that's a significant factor in Wisconsin because Wisconsin is a battleground state. It's the ultimate battleground state, the most closely divided of the Great Lakes states that are critical to both Trump and to Biden. Much closer to Pennsylvania, much closer than Michigan traditionally, although I think Michigan's might be a little closer this time around. Of the last 6 elections in Wisconsin for president of the United States, 4 were decided by under 25,000 votes. So if you've got uninstructed getting 50,000 votes in Wisconsin, roughly 50,000 votes, that means you've got double the amount that 4 of the last 6 presidential elections were decided by. It's also significantly more, about close to 30,000 votes more than Joe Biden's winning margin in 2020 in Wisconsin. So what you have to take away from that is that the uninstructed vote in Wisconsin was significant. And what I would really point to is where it came from. It came in significant numbers from Dane County and Milwaukee County. In Dane County, you got around 15% of the vote. In Milwaukee County, you were at around 12% of the vote. Why that matters is those are the great vote generators of Wisconsin. Those are the counties that produce a Democratic win in a November election. And if you're looking at 12 to 15% of your electorate in a Democratic primary saying, hey, I've got a real problem with where this thing is headed and wanting to send a message to Biden, that's a very significant number. 2 other things I'll point to before we, go deeper on this if we want to. The uncommitted vote was not as strong in rural areas. I happen to think it could have been much stronger. This is not a criticism of the people that did the campaign in Wisconsin. They did a great campaign. They just didn't have the time, the money, some of the connections that they needed. But rural Wisconsin has traditionally been a very anti-war region. And where there were campaigns, this is a significant thing, where there were campaigns in Vernon County, which is a very rural county, out around Viroqua in western Wisconsin, uncommitted was getting over 20% of the vote. In fact, in the city of Viroqua, it was right around 22%. In some of the townships around, these are very rural areas, farm areas, it was up at 25%. Up in Ashland, Wisconsin, up on Lake Superior, another place that's far afield from where people usually look at these races. In Ashland County, they were getting over 10%, and in the city of Ashland, they were actually getting 15, 20% in some of the precincts there. And so what I'm telling you is that when you look at that 50,000, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. There's nothing to think, oh, wow, that's a very significant number. But if you step back and look at some of the results from places around Wisconsin, what you realize is that with more time and more money, there's simply no question that that number would have been even higher. And also, frankly, if there wasn't a brutal snowstorm in Madison on election day, particularly in the afternoon of election day, when students vote, I think the turnout would have been much higher there. So bottom lines on Wisconsin. Number one, a very significant vote, one that is worthy of note. It was at a level that certainly is above what the margin of error in presidential elections have recently been. Number two, a vote with tremendous potential to have been much bigger had there been more time and resources. What that tells me is that Joe Biden's got, he's gotten a very strong signal from Wisconsin, as he also got from Michigan, as he also got from Minnesota, as he also has gotten from a number of other states. That ought to be taken seriously. If they don't take it seriously, they render themselves vulnerable in the November election, when the way to beat Donald Trump is to massively mobilize. And it's a lot harder to massively mobilize if you've got 10, 12, 15% of your potential electorate saying, we are unsatisfied with where you're headed.
They're saying it. I mean, because I think with this campaign, money, no money, as people find out about the campaign, they're eager to get involved in it. I've had a lot of people ask me during this campaign season, John Nichols and Rachel Idaboff, and hello, Kyle and Eva and Joshua. Hey, can't wait to bring you all in. They want to know what their options are.
Yeah.
People around the country are looking for another option because, quite frankly, John, we didn't have an option during the primary. It was Biden or nobody.
Well, this is an important thing to understand, too. And Michigan gets a lot of credit for this. And I see Joshua in the corner here on our screen, and I'm not trying to just pat him on the back, but Michigan gets a lot of credit for this because Michigan taught us that uninstructed was on a lot of ballots around the country, right? It's always been there. It's not this is like Dorothy and Wizard of Oz clicking your heels together. It's always had that possibility, but you didn't know to do it. And Michigan said, hey, let's try this line. Michigan did so well, not only winning a substantial vote, over 100,000 votes, but also and carrying some communities, but also winning a couple delegates. Michigan did so well that everybody suddenly went and looked at their own ballot. And they said, is there an option there? Can we do something like that in our state? And other states didn't necessarily have some of the advantages Michigan had. Michigan has a large Arab American population. Minnesota does as well. That was a very big factor. So sometimes in other states, they had to, create different kinds of campaigns, new kinds of campaigns. But what's happened is state after state after state where the test has been done, it has succeeded. And I note that on the call today in this conversation, Heba Muhammad has joined us. And Heba and I were at a meeting in Milwaukee in late February, and it was or early March, I guess. After it was at a point when some of this was already starting in Michigan and things were happening. But I can tell you that we were talking about possibilities in Wisconsin, and it was pretty much nowhere, right? It wasn't things had not happened at all, and here we are headed toward the primary. And I want to give high marks to Heba and to Kyle, but also to people from Voces de la Frontera, which is our great immigrant rights group in Wisconsin, from the Teaching Assistants Association, a great union up in Madison, that all endorsed this and jumped on board. Jewish Voice for Peace in Milwaukee, which did tremendous work with Sandy Pash and others stepping up. I'm naming these names only because these are the people who saw what Michigan did and picked it up, picked up that baton and ran with it. And they created something very exciting. I can't begin to tell you that I'm glad Wisconsin was on this list, right? And again, Wisconsin did its part, and other folks will talk about it in a moment. But that's the baton that now gets handed off to the next states that will have opportunities to do this. There aren't many more battleground states that will be voting that have an uninstructed or a no preference or an uncommitted option. But there are a number of additional, more red or blue states, more traditional red or blue states, All of those places can send delegates to the convention. And the bottom line is the delegates that come to that convention have the potential to have a real influence. And this is nothing's ended here. This is only beginning. But we're at a good bridge point right now with Wisconsin, Rhode Island, and Connecticut.
Absolutely. John Nichols, it's always a joy to be with you. And I just thank you I know you're between a lot of
busy time
today,
yeah.
But I'm sending you much love today.
I'm sending you even more love. And again, I'm so excited with all the people that are on here today because you've let me pontificate for a bit, but you have tremendous activists who actually have done the work across the country. And you're going to hear a lot of good stuff about Wisconsin from Heba and Kyle and Rachel, as well as a Michigander who I don't usually give respect to Michiganders, but who we have to give respect to on this.
Well, give mad respect to those of us in the Midwest. Hey,
Absolutely.
We're doing it even in the snow in April.
Yeah. And Santita, one thing before I go, one last thing, I apologize. You're broadcasting to people up in Minnesota.
I am.
And Minnesota remains really, in many ways, the gold standard on this one, because Minnesota not only got a very large vote, which is very significant, but also is sending a substantial number of delegates to the Democratic National Convention. And so, it's important for folks in Minnesota to know that the work of a primary is not done on primary day, right? You get your votes that day, but then you also have to follow through on the process of making sure that you get the delegates that you've won. Minnesota, that's going to be a significant factor. Make sure that they don't get streamed off in some other direction. And then number two, in a state like Wisconsin, where it doesn't look like any delegates were won, even though there was a significant vote, there's now the work of saying that significant vote occurred to the people who do go to that convention as Biden delegates or as public officials who are going and have a guaranteed place. It's important to keep lobbying them and tell them, hey, pay attention to what happened in Wisconsin on election day. Go to that convention and make sure that platform and the messages that come out of that convention have a core premise, a core moral premise, which is that there must be an immediate and permanent ceasefire. Hostages must be returned. Prisoners must be returned. And there must be a peace process that is absolutely focused on freedom and dignity for Palestinian people.
No question. I mean, and not to mention the fact that, look, party regulars tend to go to these conventions. You and I both know that.
Yeah.
Okay, they're not representative of the voters. So let's be very clear. There's a lot of work that's going to go through August and into November and beyond that. So let's keep that in mind, because it's the convention itself. That is one show, because it's now become a television show. That's what it is.
Yeah.
But not, well, I mean, it is. That's what it's not. They don't do the brokering and whatnot on the floor like they used to do. They don't do that anymore. The real organizing in Chicago in August will be in the streets, not in the suites. So everybody get to Chicago in August of 2024. I love you, John. It's a joy.
I love you
John
too.
Nichols, everybody.
Thank you for having me on. Thanks for giving me the honor of being with all these wonderful people.
Come on, you're a regular.
Still honored.
I love you, John Nichols. We've known each other a long time. Go back to the Jackson campaign and 1,000 years ago.
No, only about 45.
I mean, look, we were both kids then. Can you believe it? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
We were. Now I'm on my cane, but it's all right. I'm here. Love you, John.
Be strong. Love you too. And love to all the great folks you've got on here, because they're doing wonderful work.
Indeed. And I'm going to, personally, really, my co-producer today is Professor Rachel Ida Buff. You got to get people from Listen to Wisconsin. And the inspiration of the show, of course, is Josh Feinstein, because he has said, let us keep this uncommitted and uninstructed campaign on the front burner. We're on to something here, and it's very clear that we are. And Kyle Johnson and Heba Muhammad, I'm so glad that you're joining us. Before I pivot to you, let me go to Professor Rachel Ida Buff, who has gone into one of these little cafes so she can be on the show today. Oh, I'm so glad that you're with us.
Thanks, Santita. Always a pleasure to be with you. Yeah, Wednesday is my West Bend day. I come to work with my daughter and hang out. So I had to find a decent place to talk to you because I always want to talk to you and be on your fabulous show. I mean, I think what we're seeing is scattered outbreaks of actual democracy. And, that's something we are not used to in this country. And I think John Nichols' vision of it was very comprehensive. But one thing I would like to emphasize is this was a grassroots movement in Wisconsin. It was a grassroots movement in Michigan. This is not pollsters sitting around making calculations. In Wisconsin, we have a vast movement that started in October working to end the genocide, to have a ceasefire, to free Palestine. And when we saw what happened in Michigan, which came out of a similar movement, we said, hey, we want to do something like that. We hadn't, I hadn't, and I don't, to my knowledge, there hadn't been conversation about electorally, other than that people were desperately, desperately disappointed with Biden's refusal to act. This genocide, this Holocaust taking place in Gaza in the name of the American people, in the name of world Jewry, is facilitated only by the United States and its weapons manufacturers. If Biden said today, we're not selling you any more weapons or giving you any more money, it would stop tomorrow. No more hospital sieges, no more murders from the air, no more starving children. I mean, actually, the starving children, unfortunately, is going to take a while to redress, but we could start redressing it. The only reason that Israel is allowed to perpetrate these horrors is U.S. support, and that's the military-industrial complex. That's giving them money so they buy arms from our military-industrial complex, which does very well for Wall Street. That's the continual veto. And the first time we did not veto a ceasefire movement, that was after Michigan, right? So we've had an on-the-ground movement since October trying to call our politicians to respect the people, to respect the over 65% of the American people who don't want this to go on, right? And before we saw what had happened in Michigan, I think a lot of us were just like, we don't know what to do about this genocide Joe, this president who seems very happy to keep enabling this despotic and despicable regime in Israel. But what we saw in Michigan and subsequently in Minnesota and Hawaii and lots of other states is this hope. And when I was canvassing and talking to my friends and talking to people, and I know Hiba and Kyle can talk a lot more about that work because they did the brunt of it and organized the brunt of it. When I was talking to people, I was like, this isn't about, you can vote against Trump in November if that's what you need to do. This is about voting for hope, voting for something you actually believe in. My whole adult life, and Santita and I bond on this, but I'm elderly. My whole adult life, I've voted against some horrible guy by voting for some other horrible guy, right? This is about saying, I want so badly every single day. I want this to stop. I need this to stop. I can't stand it. And to be able to go to the polls and vote for something like that, I have very rarely had that experience in my life. And I'm so appreciative. I was at the watch party, as were Hiba and Kyle, last night in Milwaukee. And, when we only wanted 20,000 votes, that's what we'd aimed for. Like, we want the margin of victory for Biden in 2020. And we got beyond 20,000 votes. Everyone in the room spontaneously started sobbing. Mm-hmm. Because we are not used to hope in this country. We are not used to democracy in this country. And that's what uninstructed is. And that's what the uncommitted vote is.
Well, and we have to continue to fight for it because things are as they are because we allow it. When we make a decision, when we change our minds, everything changes. That's why, it didn't sound trite then, but I really do understand keeping hope alive. I really, really do. And I understand what it's going to take in order for us to really achieve a democracy, because that's something that we're working on. Hello, Wisconsin State Representative Lakeisha Myers, but let me go to you, Heba Muhammad, and to you, Kyle Johnson. Because you all have been doing this on the ground organizing. Listen to Wisconsin, listen to Michigan, listen to Rhode Island, listen to me. I've got an opinion, because I tell you what, there are a lot of people who wanted to vote with you who voted for Biden yesterday because, it's hard to keep believing because the oligarchy is so powerful, but we're more powerful than they are. Talk to us about what happened, Heather. What did you do? I mean, because I think that you're up against tremendous odds, and yet, with all due respect, this uncommitted and uninstructed campaign is winning every day. It really is.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting us to speak with you today. We feel, just for the first time in a long time, seen by, as a community, as an Arab community, as a Palestinian community, as a Muslim community, seen by voters across the country, and feel like our message has been heard and sent loud and clear with the support of a broad coalition of multiracial, multi-ethnic, intergenerational voters. This was a historic victory for us. And I really want to center the fact that, we know that the advocacy for a ceasefire and broadly for the liberation of Palestine does not start or end with the primary election yesterday. Folks have been organizing for 6 months, many of us a lot longer than that, to secure liberation for Palestine, because we know this is an ugly cyclical issue that comes up every few years where Palestinians are murdered for political gain by the Israeli government and folks in charge of it. And so when we decided to stand up this campaign, we set the goal of 20,000 votes, but I really want to center the reason we did this was for Gaza, was for an immediate permanent ceasefire to stop the killing of Palestinians and to work toward lasting peace and justice for Palestinians. And so last night, seeing so many Wisconsinites come out and say, we are in support of this, we demand all of these policy changes and serious policy changes, right? So we didn't just say that we want a permanent, immediate ceasefire. We also said we want to reinstate humanitarian funding, end the siege, and very importantly, end all U.S. aid to Israel, because without that, a ceasefire does not go very far into the future, right? And so it is heartening that Wisconsinites really receive this message. We know that across the state, people care and believe that anyone, no matter their background, deserves to live in safety and freedom and with dignity. And that message was projected loud and clear last night. This campaign from day one was never about persuading people to support us. We had the support. This was about getting out the message, letting voters know about the opportunity to vote uninstructed and what exactly that meant. And that made it different than any other campaign I've ever worked on. And it's gratifying to know that people are with us and that we will continue this advocacy to get those policy changes that we need. That's what it's all about.
Well, and I say at this, now that you're getting people's attention, because this is something, my parents have been involved in this for more than 40 years, like 45. That's when my mother went to Lebanon with Yasser Arafat in 1979. And I met him in 1978 at the World Youth Festival when I was 14. So we've been in this for a minute. Andrew Young was forced out of his position because my mother challenged him to speak to the Palestinian representative. He said, Jackie, this is the third rail of American politics. I will lose my job. She said, what would Martin do? And as we are on the precipice of the anniversary of his assassination tomorrow, and within 2 weeks, he had spoken with the representative and he was out of a job. Not only was he out of a job, he could not earn any money in the United States. He had to leave the United States to go earn a living. People who came out of Dr. King's movement, my parents included, didn't have a lot of money. So, I mean, this has been an ongoing struggle. You had a no talk policy. You couldn't mention Palestine. Not just in policy, you couldn't mention Palestine on TV. I mean, Rachel, Josh and I can remember that, and it was insane. It's like, and then when you got over there, when my parents got over there and they saw what was effectively apartheid and a genocide then.
Yes. And
they came back talking about it. Yeah, everybody paid a price for it. So you all have the baton now, and I want you to run on. I'm a little slower on this track, but I'm with you. So this is why we're talking about it today. And Janan has joined us, of course, with Wisconsin State Representative Lakeisha Myers. But let me go to you, Kyle. I mean, I've got all these young folks with me today, and I want you to feel free to use this show as a platform for you because the organizing yesterday was the end of the beginning. There's so much more work to do. Kyle, talk to me. What are you seeing? As an organizer, as a Black organizer, what are
Yeah.
you hearing and seeing in the Black community and in all these communities?
I mean, this is really gratifying. Apologies, y'all. I'm hanging on. I'm tired, but I'm tired for a righteous cause. And there's nothing better than leaving it all out on the field for something that is right. But what we're hearing now is we saw 47,000 folks across Wisconsin who feel the same that we do, who hear and see with their eyes and their ears these atrocities occurring, and made the decision last night to put people over politics and profit. So, we built this wide coalition, over 35 different organizations across the state, over 20 different clergy leaders, folks from labor, and, a lot of folks in the Black community, because our ties go back, Santita, as you said, to the civil rights movement.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a return to form for us where solidarity is first and foremost for our communities. We know we can't go along just to get along. We have to stand with each other, even when it is difficult. So
and we've been seeing this, but what have you been hearing when you would approach people? Because I think that it's very interesting to hear because you had to canvas.
Yeah, I mean, it's about a conversation about education because all these things are connected. So when we go out, and I'm a political director, an organization called Black Leaders Organizing for Communities, and our ambassadors go out and knock doors on the north side of Milwaukee, Racine, and Kenosha, and we always ask, what does it look like for your community to thrive? And people will say, the conversation can lead wherever from. I need a stop sign at the end of my street. I got just a vacant property over here that's, bringing down my property value. And then we get into why, well, who's your older person? We got to engage them civically and let them know who does what in government. But the conversation eventually routes its way toward our money isn't being used in the right places for the right things. Our money is being driven by corporate priorities. It's being driven by the military industrial complex. It's being driven by a Zionist agenda and far-right government in Israel, and not to build schools, not to build libraries, not to fix roads, not to provide health care, but to kill. So when people start to get these connections through that education, because they say, my community is not great, and we talk about that $380 billion a year in aid that goes to Israel, and how that money could be used here in our communities, and that activates people. How the fact that in 2020 we had Muslim and Arab communities and folks across ethnicity and race and class stand with the Black Lives Matter movement, and we can't forget that, and we can't forget that police here in America go over to Israel to train with the IDF, and then bring those same tactics back here to America to use and subjugate Black and brown communities. So it's about creating those connections for people, and folks across the Black community have been responsive and receptive to that education. I think we saw the results of that last night.
And of course, you're saying 3.8 billion, and that's just off the top. I mean, they get much more money, and with the want and lack, Kyle and Heba and Joshua and Rachel in our community in Janan, and you see this every day, Representative Myers. People are saying, you got to be kidding me, when I cannot get a computer in my school, when the internet ought to be a public utility. I can't. You mean it? We saw all of the lack and the want in America during COVID. I mean, our kids couldn't learn remotely. They didn't have computers. They didn't have access to the internet. So what did you see? Because you see, Kyle's been organizing in Milwaukee. What did you see in Milwaukee? What did you see in Wisconsin? Step back and give me the view, because you're a state representative. So not only did you see Milwaukee, but you had to look at the state.
Well, I would say from my vantage point, Santita, looking at this, it was, as a person who studies politics in general, that's the lens that I will use for this conversation. And many, many months ago, when October 7th happened, I said, and I heard what the president said in his response. I said, this is going to be a problem. I said, this is going to be a problem. And it's not going to go away, because when you hear the, for lack of a better term, the slant that was given in the beginning, it was all, we are pro-Israel. They have a right to defend themselves, but not separating terrorism from the apartheid that has been existing for many, many years. So you can't ignore that. You can't just say it all started on October 7th. It started way before then. So you have to think about all of the things, and we are all dealing with policies that we inherited that were in place before any of us were born, but yet we have to deal with the here and now of those policies and what has happened in the interim. You are absolutely correct when you talk about the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu and his policies have been far, what we would consider right wing in the United States, have been racist, have been all of those things. I think about the fact that he came to the United States and basically dissed President Obama by, not coming to the Capitol, all of those things. So just the vitriol that he has been spewing over the last few years, that has been made public to people, and all of those things that are going on. When you think about your cutting off aid, food, water, all of those things to people who are basically starving to death. When you separate and do not, oh goodness, to even think about that, how would you not allow people to have food and water and access to a way to get out of a place where you're actively bombing, just bombing innocent people,
3
for days
times.
on end.
Wait a minute. The World Central Kitchen.
Yeah.
When you travel in these war zones, you give the coordinates to the military so that you will not be attacked, which gives you cover.
Right.
Okay. People need to understand that's how you travel in a war zone. If you're on a plane, because I've done it, and when you're in a car, and they always do it with people, so-called dignitaries, so that no one gets hurt.
Right.
They knew who these workers were. They knew who they were, and they bombed them 3 times. I don't want people to wrap their heads around that. And and the sad thing is, I'm sorry, because they've been bombing. They have dropped. Gaza is the equivalent of Hiroshima and Nagasaki with all the bombs they have dropped on them 3 times.
Absolutely.
So there's that. But but they have gotten, and maybe because they're European. Okay, I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to quibble with that, because people say, wow, this is not supposed to happen to me. Well, it wasn't, and it did. And now people are up in arms, and they're saying we've got to do something. You can't just say, oops, I didn't mean. Yeah, you meant to kill them. Yes, you did. You bombed them 3 times. And I think people are getting tired of this, Representative Myers. Is that what you're hearing from your sister?
Absolutely. I think people are getting tired of it, and they are starting to do what Kyle alluded to, is draw the lines from this version of apartheid to what our people went through in South Africa, what we went through on U.S. soil, and are drawing those parallels in so many of those instances, but also looking at it from a perspective of we are, and we being the United States, leader of the free world, then lead.
Well, we are.
That's the request. To lead. Not say,
we should lead in the positive direction.
We'll do this. Well, we'll do a ceasefire for 7 days.
Representative Myers, we're being true to our tradition now. It's awful.
True.
Slavers.
Oh, yeah. When people say it's not who we are, no, it's who we are. But we have to strive to force us to live to what we say on paper. And I think that's the goal now. When you see more people trying to activate and looking at it from whatever power we have. And I will say this, Janan did an interview on the radio yesterday for Election Central, where she laid it out and talked about all of the advocacy that had been done by the community to try to educate folks about what was going on. And at the base of it is to use the political leverage that we as an individual have, and that's the vote. That's what we have worked so hard for. It's the one thing we have, it's what we could use. And she was asking people to vote, uninstructed in Wisconsin. Politically looking at this, I hope President Biden and company were paying attention, because this election will go through Wisconsin. I'm very clear about that. The other part of that is I want to know from the activist standpoint, the next steps, because uninstructed was yesterday.
Yeah.
What now? Now, how do we rally and get attention? You've drawn attention to this with, I mean, was it 47,000?
Because wait a minute, you saw Republicans too.
That too, and I was going to bring that up.
Yeah.
There were 48,098 people who voted uninstructed under the Democratic Party. There were 12,000 Republicans that voted uninstructed as well. So now for those people, now we have to draw a distinct line between what to do now to November. So now to November is phase 2. What do you do in phase 2? How do we get the people who are in power to understand what to do in phase 2? There needs to be some conversation. There needs to be some meetings. There needs to be some advocacy with folks in the White House, folks in Congress who hold the purse strings of what happens in Gaza to do that part. So now I want to know what is 2.0.
Well, you know what?
Folks have voted uninstructed, but now what happens next? Because I want to see a direct correlation. I don't want it to just be we're going to, just those people voted uninstructed. No, that's the difference between a win and a loss, a Donald Trump and a Joe Biden. When you look at the razor thin margin that happens when you look at an election, that could have been the difference. Yesterday could be the difference in November. I'm just going to say it like that.
Well,
that's the difference between a Trump in November and a Biden in November.
Well, all I know is that Trump, Biden, and RFK have the same position on Gaza, and that disturbs me. And I'm wondering, how could and RFK's to the right of all of them. So I want to know how we move this needle, because I think you're making some great points, and we've got Janan here with us, and of course we only have about 12, 13 more minutes. And Josh, I got to get you in, but I want Ms. Najib to help me, because I think you're making the great point, Representative Myers. We're making great strides. Now, what's next? Because and it should be a transpartisan conversation. Don't be afraid to talk to Republicans. If they say, you know what, I'm with you on this, bring them in. Let's join each other. I don't care. Because to me, this is not about party. This is about power. This is about ending a genocide. And whoever's on my side on that, I'm going to work with you. Period. Janan? Are you there? Oh, you gotta unmute. All the geniuses but we'll get right back. Josh, why don't you jump in?
Sure. I'd like to, first of all, everything that has been said today has filled me with so much hope. And also I want to say to the people in Wisconsin, bravo, because 48,000 votes, and also 12,900 Republican votes as well. Mm-hmm. The hope it gives me is, as we're talking about in the past, I never thought I would see the day where being pro-Palestinian could be accepted. Mm-hmm. I was brought up as a hardcore Zionist. I like to consider myself a recovering Zionist. And one thing is very clear. Everyone has said that the world has opened its eyes and said, genocide is not okay. It doesn't matter who it happens to. Genocide is not okay. And so I want to actually congratulate everyone on the line. When we had that first press conference in February in front of the Dearborn Library, and it was freezing out, we never imagined that things would go this way, this momentum would build. So Myers had a great question. Okay, what do we do now? To me, the answer is very simple. As this season wraps up, we now pivot and focus down ballot, and we focus down ballot together. And we start going after those races. In Michigan, we are focusing on specific districts, and we're actually making sure our voice is heard, but also figuring out, let me digress for a moment. In terms of those ceasefire resolutions, we created a community because people would come out and we'd meet people and we'd realize this person should run for the council seat. They should be making the decision about that. So we have many down ballot races, whether it's state or federal. And I actually making an appeal to those of you on the line here is I would like to try to start to form a proper Midwest coalition through this time, because our voting bloc can be very powerful, whether it is regional or national or at the state level. So I think that is the very clear next step. The other next step is, Santita, I will buy my plane tickets for Chicago shortly, and I'll let you know what I do.
Hello, Heba, Kyle, Janan, Rachel.
I'd like to hear
Come
I'm sorry.
here. No, come
I'd like to hear the
here.
thoughts of my counterparts as I say that about down ballot. Does it spark any in terms of that? Because I feel that is the logical next step. And in terms of up ballots, we have 2 delegates in Michigan. We're getting those ready. But we do have specific races where the wind is in our sails, and we can now challenge authority. Any thoughts about that from the other panelists or so?
I've got about 5 minutes left here, everybody. And you know what? I pledge to you, because this time has been too short. Because I think that you, Josh, and everybody here, Representative Myers, you've all said, wait a minute, we've got to talk about next steps. And, how do we organize from here? I mean, we're looking at Rainbow Push and having a gathering during the Democratic convention, almost like a counter convention, because we have to have a place where we can meet and talk and organize. Because when we see each other, I mean, look, COVID is behind us. It's with us, but it's behind us. It's endemic. It's not a pandemic anymore. It's here. Seeing each other, talking to each other is going to make a huge difference, I think, when we're in Chicago. There will be more happening in the streets than in the suites of the convention. And we have to acknowledge that. Oh, wait a minute. Look at the beautiful Janan. Janan is here. Wait a minute. On camera too. What?
Sorry.
Hey, don't worry about it.
Sorry, I was driving. You said 3:30 and I was driving and it would not connect properly. So, but I was really enjoying this. So just great discussion.
Well, you know what? Before I give you the closing words, if I could get everyone here, Heba and Kyle and Rachel and Josh and Representative Myers and you, Janan, I want us to revisit next week where we go from here. Because I think that I don't want anyone to think that I want 10,000 votes, I get 100,000 votes. I want 20,000. You didn't get 48,000, you got 60,000. Don't exclude the Republicans from that count. Some people, this is resonating with a lot of folks. And we need to think about what the ask ought to be beyond ceasefire. Don't just stop shooting me. I need more than that. You got to stop this. I need my rights. And when I see the Palestinians, I see me. That's why you're resonating with Black people. I see me. During the South African regime, during the apartheid regime, you could not land a plane in any African state. They had to refuel in Israel. Think about that. You could not land in any African nation. The first place you could land coming out of South Africa was Israel. Wow. Janan, you got, 3 minutes, 4 minutes. Congratulations, and let us move forward. Now, Josh, I'm going to put you and Rachel and have all y'all are in charge of organizing, because we're going to be on this show organizing and organizing too. There you go.
Yeah, it's not right now. There's immediate, there's kind of long term. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. First and foremost, of course, we will continue to do everything possible to bring an immediate ceasefire and to bring in unhindered aid. That's our first and foremost concern. But at the same time, I think that what we need to do and what we will do is continue to build our power, continue to work on our influence, and to really demand that our elected officials not just simply want our vote, but earn our vote, which means that they need to represent us. And then I think that what this experience, and I'm a Palestinian. My parents were one of the first families here in Milwaukee. My grandfather actually is buried in Milwaukee. We have a long history. And so I saw really what it took to kind of get to where we are as a community. But what I've also realized just in these last 6 months, but also my entire life, is education. There was a survey that where 50% of Americans didn't know a genocide was taking place. 50% of Americans did not know a genocide is taking place. I have sat and spoken to people, religious leaders, individuals, elected officials that don't understand what's going on in Palestine. They don't understand the history. So you really are not empowered to make a decision until you have all of the tools and the information. So it's a multifaceted. We will continue to push for really for justice, for equality, for human rights for Palestinians. We will continue to educate the broader community, and we will continue to build these coalitions of people. Excuse me.
Of course.
That we had been told for a long time, everyone has their little silos. And we were told that, well, we cannot achieve certain things. And what was very, very apparent for us yesterday is that when we all come together and we put our strength together, there's nothing that's going to stop us. And I think that's the message. I think the sense of empowerment that we got coming out of yesterday is that sky's the limit. Don't tell us what we can do. We see what we can do. And this was all grassroots. This was not the $1 million donors. This was not, all of these corporate entities supporting us. This was all grassroots within a very, very short time. So I think that the lessons that we learned, we were able to carry it forward. But there's a lot of work to do.
Well, we're going to keep on organizing. And the great thing is, yesterday I didn't know you. Now I do. Consider yourself my sister.
Absolutely.
And Heba and Kyle I have to be Aunt Santita. Son old enough to be auntie, at least. Maybe even grandma. But it's all right. My father said, if you don't like birthdays, try missing one. So I'm good. I have to be auntie to these babies here. But I'm so proud of the work that all of you have done. And I'm excited that we're all coming together and doing this work. Get your tickets and come to Chicago, Joshua. Rachel, thank you. Get to Chicago. Ms. Muhammad.
I think you froze, Santita.
I think her message is make sure that we are in Chicago for the convention.
Yeah.
And she wants us to all reconvene together in a week or so. And onwards and upwards. I mean, keep the momentum going.
And then you'll have to come up to Milwaukee and help us with the RNC in mid-July, because that's going to be interesting.
Very interesting. Sure. Never been to an RNC, but okay, try something new. Sure. Yeah. I don't know if we're still broadcasting, but really, so what you guys accomplished was amazing. Biden won it only by 20%.
Guys, I'm here.
20,000 votes. So sorry, go ahead, Santita.
Yeah.
I'm sending you all my love. I've got to run to this next hour, but I love you. And I just want you to know, I want to get all of you back on next week. We need to talk about this, because I think we need to, you have to, it's like going to church, going to mosque, going to synagogue. You really need to go all the time. to kind of keep you, keeps you in the rhythm of things, you know. And I think that now Joshua came to me a couple of weeks ago and he said, look, this is a movement. This is not just a campaign. So after this Tuesday, I need to come on Sunday, Monday, and I need us to talk. I said, okay, then after Tuesday, let's do that so that we can keep this going and keep talking to each other. And so everyone has my information. I'm not going to say it here because we're still recording, but everyone has my information. Feel free to use it. Rachel, please share and Josh, share my telephone number.
Will
Okay.
do.
And let's go forward from this. And if you don't mind, I'd like to share this information with James Ogby and some other people, because everybody's doing a lot of organizing, and I think we need to be connected to each other. Is that okay with everybody? Okay. So, Janan, next time I'm getting you on, you're going to be on first.
No problem. No problem. You have the best there.
Oh, look, no, you all are all the best, and you inspire me. Thank you. I feel like we're winning every day.
Thank you, Santita.
Oh,
See
may
you soon,
God bless
sister.
you.
Bye.
Oh, mwah, mwah.
Thank you,
I
everyone.
love you. God bless.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.